Hello, welcome. This is another video by Get Ahead Institute where we transform potential into success. In this video, we're going to talk about the ovarian and uterine cycles, and it's the anonymous tutor. Alright, let's get on with it. Okay, so this video, we're simply going to talk about ovarian cycle and uterine cycles. This is events that occur in the ovarian and uterine cycles, how they're related to each other, and you're going to realize that it's the same thing occurring but just different changes occurring in different places. And we're simply going to highlight as well what hormones influence these cycles, how these hormones are produced, and then the details of these two cycles. Okay, so let's get on with it. So when we talk about the ovarian and uterine cycle, we are simply talking about the changes that occur in the ovary for the ovarian cycle that will lead to ovulation and formulation of a corpus luteum. Okay, then the uterine cycle, on the other hand, is the changes that occur alongside the ovarian cycle, but these changes occur in the endometrial lining, then particularly the functional layer that happens. This happens on a monthly basis, and the average cycle we know that it is around 28 days. Okay, so when you talk about the ovarian and uterine cycles, they are interlinked. What do I mean? The ovarian cycle is going to produce hormones that are going to influence the uterine cycle, and then this is going to occur in tandem or in unison with each other, so to say. Okay, as we will see as we move on. So when you talk of hormones for ovarian cycle, they are produced by stimulation of the anterior pituitary gland by the hypothalamus. Okay, the hypothalamus is going to produce what is known as gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, that hormone is very important in that it's going to act on the anterior pituitary gland, stimulating it to produce the gonadotropins LH and FSH. When we talk of gonadotropins, we're simply talking about hormones that act on the gonads. Gonads are organs of the reproductive system. So luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone are going to act on these organs of the reproductive system that we're talking about. So these hormones act on the ovaries in this case, influencing these are reproductive organs that they're going to act on. The ovaries influencing the changes that are termed as the ovarian cycle. Alright, so when you talk of hormones of ovarian cycle, we can also elucidate their function. Okay, so firstly, we're going to talk a little about follicle stimulating hormone. The function is to rescue 15 to 20 developing oocytes from their arrest, and then we know that only one will become a mature ovum eventually. Okay, so that is simply the function of a follicle stimulating hormone in a nutshell. And for luteinizing hormone, on the other hand, we have this hormone having a surge, or the concentration of this hormone is very high mid-cycle, that is around day 14. And what is going to cause? It's about three things which are going to be noted as the function of this hormone. So it elevates the concentration of maturation promoting factor. This is going to cause completion of meiosis 1 and initiate meiosis 2 in the oocyte. Okay, the other thing that is going to happen is stimulating the follicular stromal cells to produce progesterone. In other words, it is known as luteinization. That is where the luteinizing hormone kind of gets its name, so to say. So it luteinizes the follicular stromal cells to produce progesterone. What are follicular stromal cells? So in the ovary, you have a connective tissue that has these primordial follicles in them. So that connective tissue that is in the ovary has follicular cells. Those follicular cells are known as follicular stromal cells. Okay. So stimulating of those follicular stromal cells is what is going to be termed as luteinization, stimulating them to produce progesterone. All right. Um, so after progesterone has been produced by these follicular stromal cells, they're going to cause the progesterone is going to cause follicular rupture and ovulation. Okay, so follicular rupture, what we're simply talking about is that the follicle is going to rupture and release the oocyte. Okay, and then that is what is going to be termed as ovulation eventually. So ovulation occurred at this point. Okay, so this is simply a graph that is going to show what happens to follicle and luteinizing hormone in the cycle. So we have at mid cycle, like we had said, the LH stage there, very prominent structure. Mid cycle, it's going to elevate the concentration of this hormone, luteinizing hormone in purple. Then the follicle stimulating hormone will have this concentration going up there just a bit so that it can rescue the 20 to 15 primary oocytes so that they can now go into development. Then um, this upstroke as well of this up regulation or increase in concentration of the follicle stimulating hormone at mid cycle as well, so that the, it can help in the resumption of second meiotic division and further development of this oocyte. Okay, that is what happens there. So we're going to come back to this picture when we're explaining the phases of of the uterine cycle and the phases that the uterine mucosa undergoes as well. Okay, so um, ovulation is another picture that is going to show you ovulation taking place, where you have uh, that oocyte being ruptured or being removed from the from its follicle, so to say, the Graafian follicle, and then you're going to have formation of what is known as the corpus luteum. Okay, which is the word corpus means body, then luteum means yellow. Okay, so we have a white, a yellow body. Okay, the yellow body corpus luteum. The function of the corpus luteum is, of course, to produce estrogen and progesterone that are going to be important hormones in maintaining pregnancy via maintaining the mucosa of the uterus. So the mucosa of the uterus is going to be maintained by this progesterone hormone so that it is able to support the growth of the fertilized zygote that is going to be implanted there. All right, so this diagram simply summarizes ovulation. And then the uterine cycle, on the other hand, like I said, it happens alongside the ovarian cycle. What we mean is that they occur in tandem, so to say. You, when you talk about the monthly cycle, they usually refer to as the same thing. You can call it the ovarian cycle, the uterine cycle, but you can add an extra layer of distinction by just saying that uterine cycle, you're talking about changes that occur in the uterus by monthly basis. Then the ovarian cycle, you're simply talking about the changes that occur in the ovaries, of course. Okay, then these changes that occur in the uterus through various stages, we have four stages, which is four phases. One, the menstrual phase; two, the proliferative phase; and the ovulation phase and the secretory phase. Some will add the fifth phase known as the premenstrual phase. Yeah, we can term it as the premenstrual phase or ischemia, where you have the onset of the menstrual period. Okay, so how do they tie together? We're going to go back to that picture that has the follicular phase here and the luteal phase. So you can divide the menstrual cycle using these terms in like three major phases. So the follicular phase, these are the phases before ovulation. So what is happening in the follicular phase? You have You have follicles developing. That's where the follicular phase comes from. Follicular phase, you still have the oocyte in its follicles. In the luteal phase, you have production of the luteal body. So right after ovulation has occurred, which is another short phase, which lasts around 24 hours, by the way. After ovulation, you have the luteal phase, which is accompanied by the formation of the luteal body, which is the corpus luteum, and production of progesterone hormone. Okay, so in the luteal phase, you have production of the progesterone hormone by the lutein body or the corpus luteum. Hence, this can also be called the progestational phase. And when you go down there, it's also called the secretory phase. We'll see why. Then, when it comes to the follicular phase, this is also known as the proliferative phase, and this is because this is when the cells are or rather the uterus lining, the uterus, in other words, is proliferating and increasing the functional layer is going to be building up, so to say. The cells are going to be dividing so that it can have enough material to work with when implantation occurs. Okay, so I talked about follicular phase, where we have follicles, and after the follicles have changed into the luteal body, you have the luteal phase. Okay, so then under here you have other phases. So this is how they tie together in some sense. So the menstruation, when you are exclusively referring to the uterine cycles, you have menstruation occurring there for about 4 to 5 days on average. Then you have the proliferative phase, like I say, that you have cells proliferating in the uterus so that they can increase the the functional layer to support implantation. Then after ovulation occurs, you have secretory phase, and in this phase, the uterus is um, is succulent. Okay, what we mean by succulent is that the glands are filled with the glycoproteins. The cells are enriched, so to say, they are ready for implantation to occur and to support this pregnancy, so to say, if ovulation occurs, that is. So this is how the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle tie together. If you look at it, these words on top, they let me just make this a little bit cleaner. Okay, so the words on top, you can say that they're referring to the ovarian phase, the ovarian cycle, and on the bottom you're referring mostly to what happens in the uterine cycle. So when you talk of proliferation, you're talking about something that is happening in the uterine. But then you can still call it follicular phase in the sense that you need to understand how these phases match up. Okay, what is happening in proliferative phase in the ovary, what is happening in the luteal phase in the ovary as well. So we know that in the luteal phase, in the ovary, we are going to have production of the luteal body, the corpus luteum, while the uterus is succulent, the glands are succulent, filled with glycoproteins and glycolipids to support pregnancy, so to say. So the production of progesterone from the luteal body is what supports the secretory phase down here in the uterus. So like you can see, these changes are interlinked. Okay, so that is going to be important to take note of. So yes, we've talked about the four phases in the uterine cycle and the ovarian cycle as well, how they're linked together. Then the hormones that control the uterine cycle, we have estrogen produced in the proliferative phase. Okay, this is the proliferative phase, the phase that is before ovulation. Their functions include thinning the cervical mucus to allow easy passage of sperms, and yes, that is quite self-explanatory. But one of the other functions, you have functions including going as far as maturation of the entire in females, you talk about all the secondary sexual characteristics being influenced by this hormone as well. But when it comes to the uterine cycles, you can say that one of the functions is to thinning of the cervical mucus to allow easy passage of sperms. It's very important in that aspect as well. It helps in fertilization in that manner. Then progesterone, on the other hand, it is produced in the progestational phase or the luteal phase or the secretory phase. So luteal phase, secretory phase, or progestational phase all refer to the same phase, where progesterone is produced after ovulation and it occurs after the luteal body or the corpus luteum has been formed. So this is important for maintaining pregnancy if fertilization occurs. So if fertilization occurs, this hormone is going to maintain the endometrial lining. It's going to prevent the menstrual period from coming. That's what this hormone does. So once this hormone is being produced, fertilization has occurred. It's going to prevent the menstruation, that is the bleeding or the shedding off of the functional layer of the endometrium. Okay, then we know that both of these are produced in the ovary. So like you have seen that the hormones that control the ovarian cycle, they are produced in the pituitary gland, the anterior pituitary gland. But those that influence the uterine cycle are produced in the ovary. So by influence of FSH and LH, they're going to influence changes in the ovary that are going to cause production of progesterone and estrogen in the ovaries, and then those hormones are going to influence the uterine cycle. So that's how they are interlinked to each other. So fate of the uterus and ovaries, what we are going to say in this sense is that if fertilization occurs, the uterine endometrium is maintained by progesterone, like I had explained earlier, then the luteal body does not degenerate and it produces progesterone. This progesterone is the one that maintains the endometrial lining so that it can support pregnancy. Okay, that is the important function. Okay, and if fertilization occurs, you know that progesterone is produced in response to the luteal body is maintained in response to the HCG hormone that is produced by the syncytial trophoblast, as we are going to see in subsequent videos. But it's important to just note that the luteal body will not regress or degenerate if fertilization occurs, and is going to continue to produce progesterone until the placenta can fully take up that responsibility. Okay, that is around 4 months. So the placenta will take over at around 4 months once it's fully developed, and the corpus luteum will degenerate again then. Okay, so if fertilization does not occur, on the other hand, of course, the luteal body will degenerate, and then after it degenerates, it becomes what is known as a fibrous connective or scar tissue, which causes progesterone to stop being produced because the lutein body has regressed. We don't have progesterone. Remember that progesterone is responsible for maintaining the endometrial lining. That means that endometrial lining is not going to be maintained and is going to be start to be shed off. It's going to start the shedding off, which is now referred to as menstruation, where it is represented by bleeding uh, the first 4 days to 5 days on average in the cycle. Okay, so menstrual flow occurs, which lasts about 3 to 5 days on average in the females. So that is simply that on ovulation, factors that influence it, the hormones, and everything else that occurs around it. So that is the end. Thank you.